Level 1, the Garage Tinkerer. You're 16 years old, and the car is a 1995 Honda Civic hatchback that you bought for 600 euros from a man who seemed relieved to be done with it. It has rust around the rear wheel arches, a broken door handle on the driver's side, and an exhaust that rattles at anything above 3,000 RPM. To everyone else, it's a problem. To you, it's a starting point. Your garage isn't really a garage. It's a concrete square attached to your parents' house that smells like old oil and contains a chest freezer nobody uses and a shelf of paint cans from projects that never got finished. You move the freezer to one side, you hang a single fluorescent tube from the ceiling, you drag the Civic in, and you start. You don't know what you're doing at first. That's important to say clearly. You watch YouTube videos on a laptop propped on a step stool because you can't afford a proper monitor. You pause the video, go do the thing, come back and rewind because you did it wrong. You strip a bolt and spend 40 minutes with an extractor kit. You reconnect a vacuum hose the wrong way, and the car idles like it's having a seizure until you figure out what you did. Every mistake costs you time, and occasionally money you don't have. Every mistake also teaches you something that no video can fully teach. The first modification is an intake, cold air. You spend 3 weekends researching which one to buy and 1 afternoon installing it. The sound changes immediately, deeper at low RPM, sharper up top. It doesn't make meaningfully more power, but it sounds like it does. And at 16, that matters enormously. You sit in the driveway with the engine running and feel like you changed something. You did, something inside you. The next modification is lowering springs. You watch every video available. You buy the cheapest springs you can find that get reasonable reviews. The first time you try to compress a spring without proper tools, it nearly takes your hand off. You borrow a spring compressor from a neighbor. You follow the process with extreme caution. You get the car on the ground, and it sits 15 millimeters lower than it did before. You drive it for an hour just to feel the difference. This is how it starts for every car tuner who ever amounted to anything. Not in a professional shop, not with training. In a garage that's barely a garage, with tools that aren't quite right, learning through trial and error and a stubbornness that refuses to accept not knowing. Level 2, the car meet regular. You're 18 now. The Civic has been through stages, different wheels, aftermarket suspension, a front lip you painted yourself that's slightly crooked, but only if you look closely. You know this car. You know how it starts when it's cold. You know the weird noise it makes when you hit a specific bump at a specific angle. You know where every modification lives and why each one was made. You discovered car meets 6 months ago, a parking lot on Sunday evenings with 40 people in their cars, and the specific culture that forms around modified vehicles. You showed up the first time feeling like you were entering a room where everyone knew each other and you knew nobody. You parked next to a slammed Volkswagen. The owner walked over and looked at your car and asked about the suspension setup. You talked for an hour. The community teaches you things the garage can't. You see builds you've never thought of. You understand what's actually good work and what just looks good. There's a difference, and it takes exposure to learn it. Someone at a meet shows you that your wheel fitment is wrong in a way you couldn't see yourself. Someone else explains why your brake bias needs addressing before you lower any further. The knowledge transfers through conversation in a way that transfers through no other medium. You also start learning the culture's hierarchy. Cars are evaluated with an honesty that can feel brutal until you understand it's a form of respect. Nobody is polite about a bad build because politeness would be condescending. When someone takes time to tell you what's wrong, it means they think you can fix it. You learn to receive feedback as information rather than judgment. Your build gets cleaner. Not more extreme, cleaner. The understanding that restraint is harder than excess is something every serious tuner eventually arrives at. Level 3, the track day driver. 20 years old, and someone at a meet invites you to a track day, a proper circuit, time slots, instruction available for beginners. You go expecting to go fast. You discover that you don't know how to drive your own car. The first session is 20 minutes. A more experienced driver rides along with you for the first 3 laps. He doesn't say much, he lets you drive. At the end of the 3 laps, He tells you 3 specific things you're doing wrong. You're braking too early and too hard. You're carrying too much speed into corners and losing it on exit. Your hands are tense and transmitting that tension to the steering. You spend the rest of the day working on one thing at a time. The difference between driving a modified car on the road and driving any car on a track is the difference between listening to music and playing it. One is passive, one requires everything. You modify the car differently after your first track day. Performance-oriented now. Brake pads with better heat resistance, fluid that doesn't boil under sustained load, tires with more grip because grip is everything, and anything else you add on top of better tires is secondary. You take weight out, rear seats gone, spare tire gone. Things you'd never remove on a road car come out without hesitation because the track doesn't need them. The car gets faster, you get faster. The two processes happen together, and it's impossible to separate them. This is the thing about car tuning that nobody explains before you experience it. The car and the driver develop in parallel. A faster car in the hands of an undeveloped driver is just a faster way to make the same mistakes. A developed driver in an untouched car is already finding tenths that modifications couldn't manufacture. Level 4. The Serious Builder. 23 years old. The Civic is gone. You sold it to someone who reminded you of yourself 4 years ago and used the money plus savings plus a loan from your father to buy something with more potential. A second-generation Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX, all-wheel drive, turbocharged from the factory, a platform with a real ceiling. You build it properly this time, not because you couldn't before, but because now you know what properly means. Every modification has a reason. The turbo is upgraded because the factory unit flows insufficiently for your target power number. The fuel system is upgraded because more power means more fuel demand. The intercooler is upgraded because heat-soaked air loses density, and density is power. Every change connects to the next one, the system thinking that you couldn't do at 16 because you didn't know the system. You tune the engine management yourself for the first time. You borrow an ECU reflash setup from a friend who's deeper into this than you are. You spend 2 full weekends learning the software. The first time you make a change and log the data and see the result, you feel something shift in your understanding. The engine is a system of inputs and outputs. The ECU is the translator. Tuning is the process of making the translation more accurate and more efficient. You've been a passenger in this process until now. Suddenly, you're in the room where it happens. The Eclipse makes 300 horsepower on a conservative tune, on a dyno in a shop you respect, not a number you're estimating or claiming, a number with a chart behind it. You drive it home, and the 30-minute drive is the most focused 30 minutes of driving you've ever done. Level 5. The Known Name. 26, and you have a reputation in the regional tuning scene. Not famous. Known. Your posts get shared. People recognize your car at events. Builders at a higher level know your name because you've asked good questions and done visible work. You've started helping other people with their builds. Not professionally, as a favor or because a problem is interesting, or because someone trusted you with their car and that trust is worth honoring. You diagnose things. A friend's Subaru has been tuned by 3 different people and still runs rough under boost. You spend a Saturday with a laptop and a wideband sensor working through it methodically. You find a vacuum leak so small it took 3 tuners to miss. The car runs cleanly for the first time in 2 years. You realize that diagnosing is a separate skill from building. Building is understanding how things should go together. Diagnosing is understanding why they didn't. Both require knowledge. Diagnosis requires something beyond knowledge, a kind of pattern recognition that comes from having seen enough failures to understand what failure looks like. You've seen enough now. The pattern recognition is there. You build a turbocharged front-wheel drive build that reaches 500 horsepower at the wheels, on a platform not designed for it, with a traction management solution you developed yourself after the car tried to kill you twice during testing. The build gets featured in a Japanese car culture magazine that reaches people you've never met. 47 messages from different countries in the week after it publishes. Level 6. The Professional Tuner. 29, and you're doing this for money. Not only for money, but consistently for money, which is different from the before. A small space, a lift, a dyno you share time on at a facility down the street,
a laptop with 7 different ECU tuning platforms on it, a waiting list of 3 weeks. The professional environment reveals something the garage never could. When it's your money and your car, you accept a certain level of risk in a certain timeline. When it's someone else's car and someone else's money, the standards are absolute. The difference between a tune that works and a tune that's right is invisible to most people. It becomes the thing you're most focused on. Customers bring you things they've bought cheap and tuned badly and want fixed. Some of them are fixable, some of them are genuinely dangerous, and you have conversations that require saying things people don't want to hear. You've seen enough engines destroyed by bad tuning decisions to understand that there are lines worth holding, even when someone is upset about it. You develop specialties, forced induction on naturally aspirated platforms, ethanol fuel conversions, older Japanese domestic market engines that most tuners don't know and fewer want to learn. The knowledge that most people won't bother acquiring becomes the knowledge that defines your practice. You charge accordingly. The community knows you differently now, not as someone with a good build, as someone with a practice. The distinction matters. A good build is an outcome. A practice is a commitment to a standard of work across every outcome. Level 7, the respected shop. 33 years old. You have a proper shop now, 3 bays, 2 lifts, your own dyno, 2 full-time employees. One of them you trained yourself from someone who knew almost nothing. He's good now, better than you were at his age because he had you to learn from. The shop has a reputation that extends beyond the region. People bring cars from hours away. You've turned down builds that weren't right for reasons that weren't apparent to the customer. That's always a hard conversation, but it protects something more important than the revenue. Cars you've touched win time attack events. A car you tuned holds a regional record for its class. You also teach, formally now, workshops at the shop, technical seminars at car events. You write technical content that gets read by people learning the craft. The knowledge that took you 15 years to accumulate moves faster through other people because you're organizing it and transmitting it, rather than waiting for each person to discover it independently. This accelerates everything. It's the most satisfying thing you do that doesn't involve a dyno. The business side is harder than the mechanical side ever was. Invoices, insurance, VAT returns, equipment that needs replacing exactly when you can least afford it, staff who get sick or leave or need things. You solve these problems the same way you solved mechanical problems, systematically, with the assumption that everything has a solution if you understand the problem correctly. Level 8, the builder of legends. You're 38 years old and the car sitting in your shop is going to hold a world record. Not almost, it's going to do it. You know this because you've been through the math 500 times, because the components are chosen with no compromise, because you've tested and retested and understood every variable, because the driver is the best you've ever worked with, and you've worked with people who compete internationally. The car is a Nissan Skyline that has been stripped to its legal minimum and rebuilt around a purpose-built engine that produces power numbers that would have seemed fictional 20 years ago. You built the engine yourself over 9 months, not because you needed to, because no one else who builds them is going to know it the way you know it. Record day comes. The car runs. It's not the first attempt that sets the record. The second attempt reveals something the data didn't show in testing, a fuel delivery inconsistency at the top of 4th gear. You fix it that evening. The second day, the car runs clean. The record falls by a margin that surprises even you. You don't post about it immediately. You drive home. You sit in the kitchen and drink something hot and think about the Civic in the concrete garage with the fluorescent tube and the laptop on the step stool. The distance between that moment and this one is almost impossible to calculate. And yet the logic of it is perfectly clear. Every step followed the one before it. Every mistake became part of the knowledge. Every car taught you something the car before couldn't. Level 9. The legacy. 42 years old. The shop has trained 11 people who now have their own practices. A car you built is in a museum of Japanese automotive history in Tokyo. You were invited to a global technical summit and you spoke for 40 minutes to engineers from manufacturers who build the cars you learned on. You still do the work yourself, not all of it. The business requires too much of you now. But the builds that matter most, you stay close to. Because the moment you stop doing the work, the knowledge starts drifting from real to theoretical. And theoretical knowledge in a tuning shop is a liability you refuse to carry. Somewhere right now, a 16-year-old is in a concrete garage with a used car they paid too much for and tools they're not sure how to use. They're watching a video on a laptop propped on something that isn't a monitor. They're going to do it wrong the first time. They're going to strip a bolt and feel stupid. They're going to get it right eventually and feel something that will point them forward for the next 20 years. They'll figure it out. Most do. Some of them will reach the level you reached. A few of them will go further, because they'll learn what you learned, but they'll also learn what you didn't. That's how it's supposed to work.